No one saw her pick up the charcoal. The Dragon Palace had stood for 9,000 years, its walls carved from volcanic obsidian pulled from the planet's molten heart. The stone did not chip. It did not crack. It did not yield. It remembered. Every dragon knew the first law of the palace. Nothing marks sacred stone. Nothing. The guards smelled smoke before they heard the humming. At first, it was faint, like heat shimmering over distant sand. Then the air shifted. The torches lining the corridor flickered blue. Ancient sigils etched high along the vaulted ceilings pulsed once, then again. And somewhere deep inside the palace, something that had been asleep for ages stirred. 5-year-old Lila did not notice any of that. She was sitting cross-legged on the cold black floor, a small smudge of charcoal clutched tightly in her fingers. Her dark hair fell into her eyes as she leaned forward in concentration, tongue pressed lightly against her lip. She liked the big wall. It was smooth. Wide. Quiet. It didn't talk down to her like the dragon scholars did. So she drew. Circles first. Then spirals. Then lines that curved and hooked and folded back on themselves. The shapes came easily, not copied from books, not shown by any tutor. They simply felt right. The charcoal crumbled slightly under her grip. Behind her, the obsidian began to glow. Not brightly. Not yet. Just a thin, molten red line tracing the path of her last mark. Lila frowned. "Oh," she whispered. "Pretty." The humming grew louder. High above, the ancient wardstones embedded in the palace ceiling cracked for the first time in recorded history. 2 dragon sentries rounded the corridor corner, massive talons clicking against the stone. They froze. The wall was burning. Not with flame. With writing. Each charcoal line the human child had drawn now blazed within a fire, sharp, precise, deliberate. The shapes were no longer messy spirals. They had straightened. Refined. Perfected. The air tasted like lightning before a storm. "Sounder," one guard began. Too late. The final stroke of Lila's charcoal connected 2 spirals. The entire wall pulsed. Deep in the palace foundation, something answered. A resonant tremor rolled through the structure, not violent, but awakening. Dust fell from ancient archways. Sealed braziers along the main hall ignited spontaneously, blue-white flames roaring to life. Lila blinked at the glowing wall. "I didn't mean to make it hot," she murmured. Behind her, more dragons arrived, scholars, sentries, elders, wings partially unfurled in alarm. Then they saw the symbols. And silence fell like a guillotine. The glowing marks were not random. They were not childish. They were structured. Led. Balanced in sacred geometric symmetry. The oldest dragon present, High Elder Kael'thar, felt his second heart skip. He knew those shapes. Every dragon did. But none living had ever seen them written. They belonged to a script buried before the Dragon Empire rose. A language sealed away 10,000 years ago. Pre-imperial flame script. The child turned, surprised by the sudden crowd. "Did I do something wrong?" No one answered her. Because the final rune she had drawn was still changing. The molten lines rearranged slightly, correcting stroke angles, sharpening edges, until the phrase became unmistakable. The wall brightened. And in ancient draconic fire, a single sentence completed itself. "The fire remembers." High Elder Kael'thar slowly lowered himself to one knee. Not in fear. In recognition. No dragon spoke for a long time. The words still burned across the obsidian wall. "The fire remembers." The glow did not fade. It pulsed, slow, steady, like a heartbeat. Lila shifted uncomfortably under the weight of a dozen ancient eyes. "I can wipe it off," she offered quietly, holding up the crumbling charcoal. "I didn't know it was important." High Elder Kael'thar rose slowly, wings folding with deliberate control. His scales were silvered with age, his horns etched with ceremonial rings earned across centuries of rule. "Child," he said carefully, "draw it again." She blinked. "Draw what?" "The first shape you made." Lila turned back to the wall. Most of the glowing symbols had settled into stable lines of fire. Only the last rune still shimmered faintly. She lifted the charcoal. Without hesitation, without pause to think, her small hand began moving. A curve. A hook. 2 crossing arcs. The dragons watched in absolute stillness. She did not glance at the burning symbols for reference. She did not correct herself. Her hand moved as if tracing something she could already see. When she finished, the new charcoal mark ignited instantly, flaring bright gold before stabilizing into the same molten red as the others. A scholar near the back stumbled backward. That is impossible, he whispered. Another elder stepped forward, ancient eyes narrowing as he studied the arrangement. It is not mimicry, she murmured. The stroke order is correct. The pressure spacing, another added. Even the angular variance between turns. Kael'thar's voice dropped lower. Translate it. The scholars hesitated. Pre-imperial flame script was not simply old. It was forbidden. Dragons had erased it from their education cycles after the War of Sundering. Most believed it symbolic, decorative. No living dragon had ever seen it used fluently. Until now. A younger archivist swallowed and began. The first phrase, he said carefully, is a declarative awakening. He pointed toward the glowing lines. The fire remembers. He shifted to the next cluster of symbols. This section references lineage. Not blood in the physical sense, but continuity of essence. He exhaled slowly. It reads, the blood that was scattered returns to flame. The corridor felt colder. Lila tugged at her sleeve. I just like the swirly ones, she said softly. They feel warm. A low tremor vibrated through the floor again. Not violent. Responsive. The elders turned toward the palace core instinctively. Far beneath them, deep within chambers sealed since the First Age, something ancient shifted. Kael'thar's second heart beat harder. Ask her, one elder whispered. Kael'thar crouched until his massive golden eye was level with Lila. Who showed you these shapes? She shook her head. No one. Did you see them in a book? No. In a dream. She paused. Maybe. Every dragon leaned forward. I don't remember the dream, she said slowly. But when I draw them, it feels like someone is helping me hold the pencil. The torches flickered again. The runes along the ceiling, old ceremonial etchings carved by dragon claws thousands of years ago, began glowing faintly in answer to the wall. A scholar gasped. The palace wards are synchronizing. Another rushed to the nearest embedded crystal node. Power readings are rising. Systems long dormant are reactivating. Kael'thar stood fully now. This script was sealed, he said quietly. Buried after the purges. The word hung in the air. Purges. Dragons did not speak of that era openly. A younger council member finally voiced what none wished to say. High Elder, this language was only ever shared with one other species. Silence. Slowly, ancient eyes turned toward the small human child standing beneath the blazing wall. Kael'thar exhaled a slow plume of silver smoke. This is not memory, he said at last. His gaze hardened, not at her. At history. This is inheritance. And deep beneath the palace, something that had waited 10,000 years pulsed in agreement. The council chamber sealed itself. Molten gold lines traced the circular doors as they shut, ancient mechanisms grinding into place. No guards were permitted inside. No attendants. No witnesses. Only the elders. And the truth. High Elder Kael'thar stood at the center of the chamber, wings folded tight against his scarred body. Around him, 12 ancient dragons formed a ring, scales of bronze, obsidian, ivory, emerald, each bearing the weight of centuries. In the center of the chamber, a projection of the wall's burning script hovered in living flame. No one spoke at first. They were all remembering. It was destroyed, Elder Verith said finally. Every archive. Every tablet. Every living scholar. Destroyed publicly, corrected Archivist Tharma, his voice thin. Not completely. All eyes turned toward him. Slowly, reluctantly, Tharma extended one claw and pressed it into the chamber floor. The stone responded, splitting open to reveal a sealed crystal vault beneath. Gasps rippled through the ring. You kept records, Verith hissed. I preserved truth, Tharma replied. The crystal rose, glowing faintly blue. Within it flickered fragments of memory, recorded images from an age dragons no longer taught. A time before the Empire. Before the War of Sundering. Before the Purge. The projection shifted. Dragons appeared, younger, smaller, fiercer, standing beside beings of softer shape. Humans. Not servants. Not prey. Allies. One image froze in the air, a dragon bending its great head while a human traced glowing symbols along its scales. The runes ignited in harmony. Flame script. Shared flame. The first brood discovered something, Tharma whispered. Our fire alone was incomplete. Human neural adaptability allowed them to perceive resonance patterns in raw flame. Kael'thar's jaw tightened. They could hear what we could only feel. Yes, Tharma said. And when bonded, the script evolved. The image shifted again, dragon and human standing together before a rising citadel. The palace itself, in its earliest form. They built this place together, Tharma said quietly. Silence. Then another image flickered. War. Dragons turning against humans. Flames devouring settlements. Script tablets shattered. Bonded pairs torn apart. The sundering, Verith muttered. They feared dilution, Tharma said. They feared dependence. They feared loss of control, Kael'thar corrected. The crystal dimmed. The hybrids were erased, Verith said. Every known bloodline. Every documented bloodline, Tharma said softly. The chamber felt smaller. Above them, faint tremors ran through the palace stone. She activated the core wards without instruction, one elder said. That level of script fluency requires genetic memory. 10,000 years, another murmured. No human has stepped into this palace willingly since the purges. Kael'thar closed his eyes. And yet the blood endured. Far above, in a quiet guest chamber, Lila sat on the floor with a small bowl of fruit beside her. She was drawing again. This time on parchment. The shapes came faster now. More complex. As her charcoal moved, the palace responded. Cracks in distant corridors sealed themselves with faint heat. Dormant crystal nodes along the outer walls flickered back to life. In the throne room, an ancient stone pillar, split since the sundering, fused seamlessly as if time reversed. Deep beneath the foundation, a sealed vault groaned. Locks older than dynasties disengaged. Back in the council chamber, the floor shook. Every dragon snapped their gaze downward. The core. It's opening, Tharma breathed. Kael'thar's voice dropped to a whisper. She is not learning the script. The tremor intensified, not destructive, but deliberate. Measured. Awakening. Kael'thar looked toward the ceiling, toward the direction of the small human child holding a piece of charcoal far above their ancient fears. We buried the bond, he said slowly. We burned its history. The chamber lights flared gold as the final seal beneath the palace split apart with a thunderous crack. But blood, Kael'thar finished, as ancient power surged upward through stone that had waited millennia. Remembers. The shaking stopped. Not because the power faded. Because it had finished waking up. Across the Dragon Palace, ancient systems long declared ceremonial flickered into full activation. Blue-white flame braziers roared brighter. Crystal conduits embedded in the walls pulsed in synchronized rhythm. The air itself felt charged, not with heat, but with recognition. At the center of it all stood a child with charcoal-stained fingers. Lila frowned at her parchment. I think it's missing something, she murmured. In the throne room below, 12 dragon elders stood in tense silence as the sealed floor beneath the dais cracked open. Not violently. Precisely. Stone plates slid aside in perfect geometric alignment. From the darkness below, a column of golden light rose. It did not burn. It hummed. High Elder Kael'thar stepped forward, every instinct torn between caution and reverence. The first vault, he whispered. No dragon had seen it open in 10,000 years. Above them, in her small chamber, Lila tilted her head slightly, as if hearing something distant. Oh, she breathed softly. Her hand began moving again. This time, she did not hesitate. She drew a circle, larger than before. Inside it, intersecting arcs and spiraled hooks formed a complex sigil unlike the previous ones. The charcoal snapped halfway through, but she continued with the broken piece. The moment the final line connected, the palace answered. Not with flame. With alignment. Every glowing rune across the palace walls rotated fractionally, micro-adjustments correcting ancient misalignments left from the sundering. Cracks in structural pillars sealed in thin veins of gold. Faded carvings regained sharp definition as if freshly etched. In the throne room, the golden column intensified. Within the light, shapes formed, crystalline tablets suspended in midair, each etched with flame script too complex for modern scholars to fully decipher. Recovered knowledge. Restored memory. Elder Verith staggered backward. She's rewriting the stabilizers. No, Kael'thar said quietly. He could feel it now. The palace was not being overwritten. It was being completed. In Lila's chamber, the large sigil she had drawn on parchment ignited, not consuming the paper, but projecting its form outward in shimmering gold light. The walls around her responded instantly. The same sigil appeared in fire across the obsidian, vast, precise, flawless. Lila blinked at it. It was lonely, she said softly. Her voice echoed, not in the room. In the stone. Far below, the sealed vault doors fully retracted. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal that had once required two bonded beings to activate, one dragon, one human. Now it glowed on its own. Kael'thas approached slowly. When he placed his claw upon the pedestal, it did not reject him. But it did not complete the circuit either. Instead, the golden light pulsed upward, toward the child above. Understanding hit him like a physical blow. "She is the second half," he whispered. Back in her chamber, Lila pressed her small palm against the glowing wall. The sigil brightened. Throughout the palace, dormant defensive wards reignited. Outer perimeter shields shimmered into existence for the first time in millennia. Ancient sentinel statues along the battlements opened eyes of molten gold. Not weapons. Guardians. Restored. The tremors ceased completely. The energy stabilized. The palace exhaled. In the throne room, every elder slowly lowered themselves, not in submission to a conqueror, but in acknowledgement of a restorer. Kael'thas bowed his massive head. For the first time since the War of Sundering, the Dragon Palace was whole. And a 5-year-old human girl, smudged with charcoal and unaware of history's weight, yawned. "Can I have something to eat?" she asked sleepily. No dragon laughed. Because deep in their ancient bones, they understood something irreversible had just happened. The bond they had tried to erase had not returned in fire. It had returned in innocence. And this time, the wall had answered back. The palace did not sleep that night. Not because of alarms. Because of light. Golden runes shimmered softly along corridors that had once stood dark and cracked. Sentinel statues glowed with steady internal flame. The outer shields hummed, not in warning, but in quiet stability. The Dragon Palace had not felt this, alive, in 10,000 years. And at the center of its awakening, a small human child slept with charcoal still smudged on her fingers. By dawn, the entire Elder Council had assembled in the Great Hall. Word had already spread beyond the palace walls. The sky above filled with circling dragons, scholars, generals, historians, all summoned by a signal that had not been used since the First Age. The hall doors opened. Lila walked in holding High Elder Kael'thas' talon with both hands. She looked unimpressed. "Is this about the wall again?" she whispered. Kael'thas' ancient eyes softened. "Yes, little one. It is." At the center of the hall stood the restored pedestal from the first vault. The crystalline tablets hovered above it, rotating slowly, each etched in blazing flame script. Every dragon in the chamber bowed as Lila approached. Not deeply. Not ceremonially exaggerated. But fully. A unified lowering of heads from creatures who bowed to no throne. Lila blinked. "Did I fix it?" she asked. Kael'thas lowered himself until his great silver head nearly touched the floor before her. "You remembered us," he said. The hall fell silent. For centuries, dragons had told themselves the purge was necessary. That dependence on humans weakened them. That flame script belonged to dragonkind alone. But the palace itself had judged differently. Without the human resonance, it had withered. Without shared flame, it had grown quiet. A young dragon scholar stepped forward, voice trembling slightly. "High Elder, if humans carry this inheritance, why did they forget?" The question hung heavy. Kael'thas lifted his gaze slowly. "Because we taught them to," he answered. A ripple moved through the chamber. "We burned the archives. We severed the bonds. We hunted the bloodlines. We told ourselves we were protecting our future." He turned toward Lila, who was now staring curiously at one of the floating tablets. "But we were erasing it." The pedestal pulsed softly as Lila reached up and traced one glowing rune in the air. The script rearranged itself slightly, stabilizing, clarifying, correcting ancient distortions. She giggled. "It likes when I do that." A quiet, almost embarrassed warmth moved through the chamber. Kael'thas rose to full height. "From this day forward," he declared, his voice resonating through stone and sky, "the flame script shall no longer be sealed knowledge." The runes along the hall walls flared brighter. "Humanity will not be erased from our history again." The statement carried beyond the palace, transmitted through crystal relays across dragon territories. Not a threat. A correction. The young scholar spoke again, more softly this time. "Does that mean she will rule us?" Lila paused mid-trace, looking mildly concerned. "I don't want to rule anything," she said quickly. "I just like drawing." A low rumble of amusement, gentle and warm, moved through the dragons. Kael'thas' eyes gleamed. "No," he said. "She will not rule." He looked at the restored palace, the awakened wards, the glowing vault of knowledge. "She will remind." The great hall doors opened to the morning sky. For the first time in millennia, dragons did not look down upon humans as fragile creatures passing briefly through history. They saw continuity. They saw shared flame. They saw something they had once feared. Not weakness. Connection. Lila tugged at Kael'thar's talon again. Can I draw outside next time? The High Elder almost smiled. Yes, he said gently. But perhaps not on anything older than 9,000 years. She nodded seriously. As sunlight poured into the hall and illuminated the restored runes, one final line stabilized across the highest arch, written not by claw or chisel, but by inheritance. The fire remembers. And this time, so do we.